Judy Garland. Judy Garland was a bright and talented young girl who became a Hollywood movie star in her early teens, but her life behind the scenes was very hard. The studio made Judy work extremely long hours with almost no rest. To keep her going, the studio heads and even her own mother gave Judy special pills. In the morning, they would hand her pep pills, a kind of medicine to give her energy so she could stay awake and keep performing even when she felt exhausted. At night, when she couldn't sleep, the studio doctors gave her sleeping pills to force her to rest. Judy later said taking these pills became a way of life for her and her co-star Mickey Rooney. She was just a teenager, but she was already dependent on these drugs day and night. This treatment took a huge toll on her body and her emotions. Judy was often hungry, tired, and anxious because of the pressure and the drugs. As she grew older, she couldn't stop taking the pills, and they badly hurt her health. Tragically, she died at 47 years old from an overdose after a lifetime of this harmful routine. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was one of Hollywood's biggest child actors in the 1930s and 1940s. He was famous for his cheerful energy on screen, but few people knew what he was going through behind the scenes. Just like Judy Garland, the studio forced Mickey to take pills to keep him working. The movie studio bosses fed him energy pills to keep him lively during long filming days, then gave him sleeping tablets at night to calm him down, sometimes repeating this cycle so he could work almost 3 days in a row without proper sleep. Mickey trusted the adults in charge, so he took the pills as he was told, not realizing how dangerous this was. It made his young body dependent on the drugs, and it left him emotionally drained. Mickey later struggled with this drug habit for many years. In fact, he relied on these pills even into his adulthood until a health crisis finally forced him to stop. Judy remembered times when studio doctors had to knock them out with sleeping medicine for a few hours at the studio hospital, with Mickey on one bed and her on another. His childhood should have been fun and carefree, but instead, the studio's demands and drugs left lasting damage on his life. Patty Duke. Patty Duke was a very successful child actress in the late 1950s and early 1960s. She was famous nationwide, but Patty's personal life was troubled. When she was just 8 years old, her care was taken over by a husband and wife talent management team named John and Ethel Ross. These managers controlled everything in her life. They even gave her prescription pills and alcohol by the time she was 13. The pills were supposed to make her act the way they wanted, sometimes to pep her up with energy, other times to calm her down. Patty was still a child and didn't fully understand why they were giving her this medicine. The things her managers did caused Patty a lot of pain. She felt confused, lonely, and afraid, and the drugs made her moods even worse. The public had no idea that behind her smile, she was living in fear. Once she grew up, Patty finally got proper help for her mental health. She spoke openly about her past in a book and became an advocate to protect child actors from abuse. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was a famous Disney child star in the 1940s and early 1950s. He starred in big Disney movies and even voiced the character Peter Pan. On the screen, he seemed to have a magical life, but reality was much harsher. When Bobby reached his early teens, the Disney studio suddenly dropped him as soon as he hit puberty and his looks changed. He went from being celebrated to feeling discarded and alone. In high school, other kids bullied him, and he felt very lonely. With no guidance from the adults who once managed his career, Bobby began hanging out with the wrong crowd. By age 17, he started using dangerous drugs to escape his problems. No one intervened to help him stop. He quickly became addicted, and the drugs took over his life. Bobby's bright acting career collapsed as he fell into addiction and got into trouble with the law. He lost his money and his health. Tragically, Bobby Driscoll died at just 31 years old after years of drug use had ruined his body. It was a heartbreaking end for someone who had been a bright young star. Scotty Beckett. Scotty Beckett was a popular child actor in the 1930s, remembered for appearing in the Our Gang comedy shorts. He charmed audiences, but as Scotty grew into his teenage years, he struggled to adjust. Like many child stars, he had trouble finding his place as he got older. Unfortunately, Scotty fell into bad habits during this time. As a teenager, people around him introduced him to alcohol and pills. He began using these substances, and it hurt him deeply. The drugs made him unreliable at work and changed his personality for the worse. Directors stopped hiring him because they couldn't count on him. Scotty became very depressed. Instead of getting help, he kept using alcohol and pills, which only made his sadness and anger worse. His bright Hollywood career faded, and he struggled to support himself. No one was there to guide him away from this dangerous path. By the time he was in his 30s, Scotty's body was worn down from years of substance abuse. He died at only 38 years old, his life cut short after so much promise. Scotty's story shows how quickly things can go wrong when a young actor tries to cope with fame and stress by using drugs. Anissa Jones. Anissa Jones was a child star in the late 1960s who played Buffy on a popular TV show called Family Affair. On TV, she was a sweet and cheerful little girl with a doll named Mrs. Beasley. In real life, however, Anissa faced a lot of pressure and sadness after the show ended. She had trouble finding new roles and struggled in her personal life. As a teenager, Anissa became mixed up with drugs. The adults around her did not protect her, and one doctor even became her supplier for dangerous pills. This doctor illegally gave her whatever medicine she wanted, acting more like a drug dealer than a real doctor. Taking these pills and other drugs made Anissa feel numb and distant, and she lost the bright spark she had as a child. Her schoolwork and friendships suffered. Sadly, Anissa's life ended in tragedy. In 1976, when she was only 18 years old, she died from a severe drug overdose. The coroner said it was one of the worst overdose cases they had ever seen. Anissa's story is heartbreaking because she was just a teenager who needed help, but instead she got easy access to harmful drugs that ultimately took her life. Dana Plato. Dana Plato was a teen actress best known for her role as Kimberly on the 1980s sitcom Different Strokes. She looked happy on camera, but off camera her life became very difficult. She found fame early in her teens. With fame came new temptations. Dana later admitted that by the time she was 14, she had already started drinking alcohol and using hard drugs. She even overdosed on prescription pills once when she was just 14. The adults in her life didn't stop her, or maybe didn't realize how serious the problem was. Dana's behavior became erratic, and her work suffered. The producers eventually let her go from the show, partly because of her drug problems. Being cut from the series made Dana feel lost and depressed. Over the next few years, her addiction grew worse. She couldn't find steady acting work. Dana tried to get her life back on track, but the drugs kept their hold on her. In 1999, Dana Plato died from an overdose of painkillers at 34. It was a sad end to a life that once seemed so hopeful. Dana's story shows how having fame at a young age without proper support can lead to very serious problems. Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman became one of the most recognizable child actors of the 1980s, starring in classics like The Goonies, Stand By Me, and The Lost Boys. Behind his success was a troubling reality. By his own account, Feldman was introduced to drugs at just 14 years old by adults who were supposed to be looking after his welfare. These weren't just any adults, they were people with power in the entertainment industry. In interviews in his memoir, Feldman has described how he was given cocktails of pills supposedly to help with various ailments or to keep him energetic on set. These substances, combined with alcohol he was allowed to consume as a minor, led to addiction by his mid-teens. His parents, who should have protected him, were instead focused on his earning potential. By 16, Feldman was legally emancipated from his parents after discovering they had spent most of his earnings. Now an advocate for child actor protections, Feldman has been vocal about the systematic way drugs were used to control and manipulate young performers, leaving lasting scars that followed many into adulthood. Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore captured hearts as the adorable little girl in E.T. at just 7 years old. What the public didn't see was how quickly her childhood spiraled out of control. By age 9, Drew was regularly drinking alcohol, introduced to it by the adults in her life, including at Hollywood parties where she was treated as a miniature adult rather than a child. Her mother, Jade Barrymore, frequently took young Drew to adult venues like Studio 54, where she was exposed to a world of substances and adult behaviors. By 10, Drew was smoking marijuana, and by 12, she was using cocaine. The adults who should have been protecting her were instead enabling her access to these substances or looking the other way. At just 13 years old, Drew's addiction problems had become so severe that she was institutionalized for 18 months. Unlike many child stars whose stories ended in tragedy, Drew eventually fought her way back to sobriety and rebuilt her career in life. Her early experiences led her to be extremely protective of child actors today and advocate for stricter protections on set. River Phoenix. River Phoenix was considered one of the most promising young actors of his generation throughout the 1980s. With his natural talent and thoughtful demeanor, he seemed destined for a long, successful career. However, behind his calm exterior, River was battling demons that began in his unusual childhood. As a young member of the religious cult Children of God, River had experienced trauma before even entering Hollywood. Once in the entertainment industry, he struggled with the pressure and expectations. Though initially known for his clean lifestyle, by his late teens, River had begun using substances, often provided by older friends and industry insiders. People who knew him reported that he was given various drugs to help him cope with anxiety on set or to wind down after intense performances. As his career progressed, his substance use worsened, though he maintained a professional image in public. Tragically, River Phoenix died outside the Viper Room nightclub in Los Angeles in 1993 from an overdose of multiple drugs. He was just 23 years old. His death shocked Hollywood and highlighted how easily talented young actors could fall into destructive patterns often enabled by those around them. Danny Bonaduce. Danny Bonaduce shot to fame playing the mischievous Danny Partridge on The Partridge Family in the early 1970s. His trademark red hair and witty character made him instantly recognizable. However, Danny's real life was far from the happy family portrayed on television. Behind the scenes, he faced physical abuse at home and found little support on set. By his own admission, Danny was introduced to drugs and alcohol while still working on the show. Adult crew members would sometimes give teenage cast members beer and other substances during breaks or after filming. Without proper guidance or boundaries, Danny developed unhealthy coping mechanisms that followed him into adulthood. After The Partridge Family ended, he struggled to find his footing. His substance abuse worsened, leading to homelessness and legal troubles. Unlike some of his peers, Danny eventually managed to turn his life around, finding success in radio and speaking candidly about the dangers child actors face when the adults responsible for their well-being fail to protect them from harmful substances and environments. Macaulay Culkin. Macaulay Culkin became the highest-paid child actor in history after starring in the Home Alone films in the early 1990s. His cherubic face and comedic timing made him a global star before he was even a teenager. Behind the scenes, however, Macaulay's life was controlled by his father-manager Kit Culkin, who was known for his demanding and sometimes harsh treatment. As Macaulay entered his teens, the pressure of maintaining his career while dealing with family dysfunction took its toll. Though he has been private about specifics, in later interviews Macaulay acknowledged that he was exposed to alcohol and drugs at a young age, often in adult environments where he shouldn't have been. By 14, he was emancipated from his parents after they fought over control of his earnings. In his late teens and 20s, Macaulay struggled with substance abuse issues that many attribute to his unusual childhood and the lack of proper adult guidance. Though he was arrested in 2004 for possession of controlled substances, Macaulay has since stabilized his life and become more selective about his roles. His experience highlights how even the most successful child actors often lack protection from harmful influences when thrust into adult worlds. Tatum ONeal. Tatum ONeal made history as the youngest person ever to win an Academy Award, taking home the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress at just 10 years old for her role in Paper Moon, 1973. Despite this incredible achievement, Tatum's childhood was anything but idyllic. Her father, actor Ryan O'Neal, gained custody of her after divorcing her mother, who struggled with addiction. However, Ryan's parenting was deeply problematic. By Tatum's own account in her memoir A Paper Life, she was exposed to drugs at an alarmingly young age in her father's home. She has spoken about how drugs were openly used in her presence, and by age 12, she was experimenting with substances herself. The film sets she worked on as a child had few protections in place, and she often found herself in adult situations without appropriate supervision. Some directors and producers turned a blind eye to her substance use as long as she could perform on camera. Tatum struggled with addiction for decades before finding sobriety as an adult. Her story illustrates how even the most talented child performers were vulnerable to exploitation in an era when few safeguards existed to protect young actors from harmful substances. The industry response. The stories of these child stars eventually led to changes in how young performers are treated in Hollywood. By the 1990s, advocacy groups began pushing for stronger protections. California passed the Coogan Law, named after Jackie Coogan, another early child star whose earnings were squandered by his parents, to protect child actors' earnings. Later amendments strengthened requirements for education on set and limited working hours. Drug testing became more common on productions involving minors, and studio teachers gained more authority to monitor child welfare. Organizations like A Minor Consideration, founded by former child actor Paul Peterson, work to provide support and advocacy for young performers. Despite these improvements, challenges remain. The entertainment industry continues to be a high-pressure environment, and young performers still face unique stresses that can make them vulnerable to substance abuse. The lessons learned from these tragic cases serve as important reminders of why protecting child performers must remain a priority for everyone involved in creating entertainment.